Hey guys, Rich here, and a couple days ago I posted a photo on Reddit on camping and aviation that got a lot of traction and got a lot of questions. So I thought today I'd go through those questions and give you guys answers. So question number one is, what is the most exotic place that I've camped? And that's a hard one to answer because I've gone to some pretty cool places. So in general, my three favorite places would be Idaho, Utah, and in northern Lake Michigan at Fox Island. In Idaho, there are some great strips in the national parks and national wilderness areas, and we're really lucky to be able to get those because motorized transportation is just not allowed in those areas at all, other than airplanes. And these strips are being preserved for firefighting needs and backcountry rescue needs and those sorts of things. So we're the lucky beneficiaries of that program. In particular in Idaho, Moose Creek is one of my favorite places. It's got crossing runways. It's in a really beautiful location. It's down low enough that the nights are still warm, and there's a couple of rivers going through there. Johnson Creek is a very famous one among the aviation community, and it's famous for being easy. So you don't have to have a high-performance airplane to get in and out of there. In Utah, we're talking about the canyon lands and BLM land for places like Nokai Dome, Mineral Canyon, Happy Canyon, places like that you're down in a canyon. You've got beautiful views. You can often do rock hounding. There's a lot of petrified wood and things like that. So it's absolutely gorgeous kind of anytime you go to any of those places. Then in Michigan, there's an island called North Fox Island, and North Fox Island is owned by the state and is completely undeveloped other than having an airstrip. So if you go there on a weekend, there's probably a couple airplanes there and you get to make some new friends. If you go there on a weekday, odds are pretty good you'll have the whole place to yourself and have 800 acres to just hang out in and make a campfire and chill out. Next question is, how do you find places to camp? So the Utah Backcountry Pilots Organization has a website that has a bunch of things in Utah, very well put together, and that's a resource that's also available on your iPad for flight planning. The Recreational Aircraft Foundation is another organization that has an online resource, and they actually run a bunch of different airstrips all over the country, so you can get them from there. And then otherwise, you network. You talk to pilots, you find out where they're going, why they're going, all those sorts of things, and go to some cool places. A bunch of people ask what kind of tent I'm running. So right now, this year, I've been using a white duck bell tent, 13 foot, big enough for a queen size bed. It's canvas, so it's really heavy. It's about 60 pounds. So it's good for car camping, or if you have a larger airplane like this one. If you have a small two-place airplane, or you're backpacking, it obviously wouldn't be a good choice at all. Somebody asked what I do with the leftovers. They noticed that I cook basically family-sized portions, but travel alone. So the answer to that is simple. I always have a cooler, and I put them in a Ziploc, and then I eat that meal for 2 or 3 meals after that, so that I don't have to cook a fresh meal every single day. Next question is about fuel planning. I think they were guessing that these backcountry airstrips don't have fuel. Absolutely correct. So what you do is you figure out where you're going, what it's going to take to get there, and then what it's going to take to get to the next airport beyond that. And knowing that, you plan your fuel accordingly. Somebody wanted to know what defined backcountry aviation. So the definition that I kind of use is anywhere off the beaten path. So airports that don't have fuel, airports that don't have support infrastructure, those sorts of things are things that come to mind. If they've got water or electricity like Johnson Creek does, then that can be still considered backcountry because it is so remote. But I do prefer places like Wilson Bar that has none of those things and you're completely unsupported. There was a question about what aviation YouTubers I like. So obviously I've got my channel and have met and hung around with a lot of aviation YouTubers. Two of my favorites are Glenn's Hangar and Glenn and Friends Cooking Channel, because he combines the two interests that I have, and he's been doing it for a long time and makes some great content consistently. The other one would be Brian Turner with Just Plain Silly, where he kind of does skits and sketches that are all aviation-based. And it's a little different kind of angle on aviation. So those two are both great guys making great content. And I've linked to Brian's and Glenn's channels below in the description for this one. A lot of people wanted to know about the costs associated with aviation. And the answer to that is that it's not cheap, it's not free. But I drive a 25-year-old Jeep that cost me $2,000 5 years ago. And this airplane costs less than a new SUV. A lot of people have SUVs. They just drive them to work. They don't get to have any fun in them. I decide to drive a junkier car and do this on weekends. Someone asked how we communicate. And there are two different flavors to that. One is how do we communicate if we have an issue on the ground, and how do we communicate with other airplanes operating in the same area. So the airplane part is we all have radios and communicate that way. It's not a legal requirement to have a radio, but the vast majority of people do. And that's a lot of the safety factor right there. We also just look around. We look outside the airplane. We look for other airplanes, just like you do in traffic, even though you can't talk to the other people that are driving in the same vicinity as you.
360 here, give you some space, and start heading downhill.
Roger that. The other answer is, what do you do if you have problems when you're in the backcountry? So I carry a satellite communicator, and I also have a Starlink dish, so I get internet access in very remote areas, and between the two, I can get contact with anybody that I need to. Someone picked up on the fact that I work from a lot of these campsites and wanted to know what I do for a living. So the answer is that I'm a computer scientist for UCSD, working for the San Diego Supercomputer Center. So I can telecommute from anywhere that I want to, and that lets me go to places like Nokai Dome and hang out for a week and enjoy the backcountry while telecommuting from a white duck cell pen. Somebody saw the ribeye that I made at camp and wanted to know what I use to cook. And the answer to that is that it depends on what I'm cooking and where I am. So if I'm going someplace where I can take extra weight, then I'll bring a grill and a tripod and cook over a fire that way. If I'm going someplace for an extended trip where weight is more of a concern, so I'll just bring a propane stove. And the ribeye in particular was just made on a propane stove with a frying pan. A bunch of people got salty, thinking that it was a flex and a weird humble brag or whatever, and whatever. Reddit is Reddit, the internet is the internet. The reason I asked the question that I did, which was, are there any other people that airplane camp, is because on Facebook we actually have a pretty healthy community. We've got some 16,000 people subscribed to a airplane camping group on Facebook, and I was kind of surprised not to find anything like that on Reddit, but it is what it is, I guess. Okay, next question was, how frequently do you do this, and is it practical from a camping standpoint? So the answer to that is that it depends on the year. So I've had years where I spent 50 or 60 nights in a tent next to my airplane, and I've had years that I spent 15. So it depends on what else is going on in life, but it's something that I prioritize and love to do, so I do it as frequently as I can get away with it. Somebody mentioned young eagles, and I wanted to talk about that because another topic that came up was the idea of how do you get flight training. So Young Eagles is this program put on by the Experimental Aircraft Association to get kids interested in aviation. So volunteer pilots like myself take kids up flying and show them that aviation is a thing that normal people can do, and hopefully inspire them to pursue it as a career, as a hobby, as whatever. And we did one down in Mexico a few years ago to get some of the kids from the local school interested, and I found out after the fact that we had in fact inspired one of the Eagles. So one of the Eagles that flew with me in my plane went to school to become an air traffic controller, and she's now working in Mexico in ATC. So I thought that was super cool. Somebody who must be watching a bunch of these videos asked about wearing a survival vest and asked why I don't. And the answer to that is that I've got a survival vest that I made a few years ago, and I just didn't find it comfortable. It's very bulky, and it's only useful in a very limited set of circumstances, like basically where the plane crashes and then catches on fire, but I managed to get out of the plane before it catches on fire. This time of year, there is a risk associated with having a minor crash and being in a remote field or something like that. So we go by the rule of dressing for the crash. So I've got a down jacket, I've got snow pants, I've got my lobster claws, I've got a good warm hat, I've got mobile phone, satellite communicator, some of the other stuff that I mentioned previously. So I should be able to be fine for an extended period on the ground. But all I've got on me is stuff to stay warm. And finally, the last question is, what kind of airplane is that? Aviation, there are basically two classifications of airplane, experimental and factory built. This airplane is an experimental airplane that's modeled after a factory airplane, so it's kind of a blend of the two. So there's an airplane manufacturer called MAL, and this is basically a MAL M7 that was built by an individual to his specifications in order to make some changes to the airframe and to the engine. So the engine is a 300 horsepower high compression engine where the factory models have 180, 235, or 260, and the wings are 6 feet shorter than a factory model. Okay, so that's all the questions that were asked. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you over on the YouTube side of my life. See ya.